Hello, I'm Alex Burton. This is the Business File. In doing some research for the show, I picked up this form. A lot of questions here about my life, what I've been doing with myself over the years, what I have to offer a company. It's a job application form, and I guess that's what you and I normally think of as the way companies go about hiring people. On the surface, it all seems simple enough, but from a business's point of view, the task of acquiring the right people and putting them in the right jobs is not nearly as simple as studying an application form. Well-run businesses have a whole system carefully worked out about how to hire and then develop employees. Crucial, because people supply the talent, skills, and knowledge an organization has to have to meet its objectives. During the course of our exploration, we're going to visit with 3 people who are specialists in the area of human resources. They include 2 business executives in quite different kinds of companies and a noted university professor. Our first guest is Mike Kissner. Mr. Kissner is Vice President of Human Resources for the Cullum Companies, and they are a multi-regional owner and operator of supermarkets, drugstores, and related businesses from Texas to California. And we're visiting with Mr. Kissner in his office in Dallas. Hello, Mike. How are you today?
Alex, fine. It's good to have you with us.
Well, I'd like to begin by telling you that for the last few minutes I've been sitting here working on this job application form, and I'd like you to tell us how a job application fits into the big picture of human resources management.
Well, Alex, I hope you didn't mess it up too bad. The application form is really the first step in the employment process and really one of the first initial areas of human resource planning. Really, I view the application blank as a person's entry into a company. A company has an opportunity to fill a job that needs to be filled. The application blank is the first step in the company being able to identify with the person. Does that person have the background, the qualifications to fill that position adequately? And the application blank really tells us that story, or it's the first part in telling us that story.
You used the word process in talking about the application blank. Can you describe that process for us?
Well, we're looking at a number of areas. I think first starting with planning. That is our meeting with others on our staff to determine what are the needs of the organization, both short-term and long-term. What do we need today? What do we need tomorrow? What do we need 6 months, a year from today? Identifying what the needs of the company are as far as human resources are concerned, where we're going to find those individuals, how we're going to train those individuals, how we're going to orient them into the company. All of those areas are essential to the human resource planning function. Then, of course, once the person is identified and selected and has gone through the selection process, then it's a matter of nurturing that individual, watching them grow, helping them grow in the organization so that they can contribute to our profitability as an organization.
From what you're saying, a company must put an awful lot of time and talent and money into the human resources process. From a business perspective, tell me why that is.
Well, if you've ever read any annual reports, you may have read that many companies promote the idea that people are our most important assets. And at our company, like many companies, we believe in it too. But saying it and doing it, I think, are 2 different ideas altogether. The human resources of a company really spells the difference in many cases between a company being successful or not being successful. And how well a company motivates its employees, how well they get them to act in a team effort to promote the best interests of the company, I think really spells the difference between a company being successful or not successful. So we spend a lot of time in our company in developing those human resources because we believe they are our most important assets.
Okay, Mike, you put a lot of emphasis in the Cullum Companies into acquiring and developing people. But at the same time, we know that nothing operates in a vacuum in the real world. The same must be true of human resources in the hiring process. What outside forces influence hiring and developing people?
Well, of course, I believe the biggest factor today is probably the impact that the federal government has on the hiring process. And of those laws or legislative rules that come into effect, I think 2 are very important today. One would be equal employment opportunity, the EEOC, the commission which oversees that activity, and of course affirmative action programs. almost any company of any size is subject to EEOC requirements and that legislation from the mid-1960s. Affirmative action is a little bit more selective in that many companies involved with affirmative action programs have relationships, business relationships with the federal government. But even in the absence of a formal affirmative action program, there's a moral obligation to do what's right for the community. So many companies that don't have a written affirmative action program may have a self-imposed or less formal type of an affirmative action program. I guess there are other factors too at all levels of government. The wage and hour laws, for example, for the federal government and also for the state, age discrimination, whether you're dealing with a union organization, all these factors impact hiring decisions.
You've talked with us about the overall human resources process. Let's focus now on what happens initially in that process. Can you walk us through that?
Well, I think the most initial important step is the planning process. What are the needs of the organization? Where are we today? What are our needs today? And where are we going to be tomorrow? And whether we're looking at a year from now or 5 years from now, it's a collaborative effort to determine what the human resource needs of the organization are. Once those needs are established, then I believe the next step would be identifying sources of recruitment or answering the recruitment question. Whether we promote from within the company, who are promotable candidates, why are they promotable, what do we have to do to get a person promotable, is there enough time to do that to meet the needs of the organization, or is it necessary for us to go outside the company? If we go outside the organization, then what are our resources for going outside the company? Are we looking at college recruiting, ads in the want ads? Just where do we find people that are going to meet the needs of the organization?
So, Mike, those two steps, planning and recruiting, help you identify a pool of candidates. What's the next step from there?
Well, then I think we get into the selection process.
You used the word process again. What's the purpose of this process?
Really, Alex, at that point, we're trying to determine whether the person demonstrates the background that we need in order to fill that position. We're comparing that candidate with other people that we have within the company, other applicants from outside the company. And we're really trying to match up the background of the individual with the position that the company has to offer at the time. And if we see a match, then it leads on to other processes in the human resource function.
Well, I want to take a look at the selection process itself. And to do that, we've put together a little story. And Mike, I'd like you to watch it with us.
A journey to a job begins where our program began, with an application blank. It tells a manager about an applicant's education and experience, and it sets the selection process in motion. To eliminate the most obviously unqualified candidates, there's a preliminary interview. It can open the door for testing. There are aptitude tests and performance tests, tests that measure physical skills and personality. The tests determine whether the person has the ability to do the job. A qualifying score puts the person on the road to in-depth interviews. The aim here is two-way communications. Prospective managers learn about the person's expectations and values, something they can't learn from an application form, and the applicant gets to know more about the company and the job. Assuming a mutual interest in continuing the journey, the manager checks references. What do past employers think of the work that was done for them? Before making a job offer, there's a physical examination. That's to protect against insurance claims for pre-existing conditions and to be sure the applicant can handle physical demands of the job. The final light will take one to negotiation over initial salary. That depends on the company's compensation philosophy.
Okay, Mike, you saw the steps in the process. Tell me, how do you determine what a candidate's pay will be?
Well, I'd like to say that that's a science, but there's still a lot of art to it as well. Most positions have a beginning entry-level pay rate and a maximum pay rate or a pay range. Where that person falls in that range is really a function of what their past experience has been, and I suppose to a great extent what supply and demand dictates to us at the time. I like to look at a person's background. What has their salary history been in the past? The company that they're leaving, at what level are they at right now? and how does that salary level fit into what our organization has to offer at this time. By taking all those factors into consideration, then we make an offer to the individual, and then it's up to the individual to determine whether or not that's acceptable to them or not.
Mike, I want to thank you very much. You've given us some valuable insights into the employment process, and it's been a real pleasure.
Well, I've enjoyed it too, and you're more than welcome to come back one day.
So far, we've seen what happens in a company up to the time a person gets hired for a particular job. But what happens after that? Well, to guide us through that subject, we're going to the offices of Sun, a major oil company in Dallas. We'll speak with Susie Christie, who is Manager of Employee Relations for the Exploration and Production Division of Sun Company. Hello, Susie. We're looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Alex. It's always a pleasure to talk about my field, which is human resources management.
Susie, we've come to a point in our discussion where an employee is hired, goes to work for the company. Once that's happened, how do you orient a person to the job?
When we've hired an employee, our job really has just begun. We've made an investment in that person and we've brought them on the payroll to do a specific job. But they come with a certain set of expectations, and we as an organization have a certain set of expectations, and we have to put a lot of effort into melding those expectations into one set of goals or values that are going to be productive for both the employee and the company. So we do it primarily in a three-step process. The first day the employee reports to work, a little time is spent getting them on the payroll, explaining the basic benefit programs to them in the HR department.
All right, that's one step. What's next?
Then they are taken to the hiring manager, and the appropriate introductions are made, and that manager has a checklist of things that should occur with that employee over the next few days. They have to know where the coffee pot is. They have to know that at Sun we don't have a prescribed time to take breaks. They have to know what their options are in terms of work hours. They have to know just basic information in order to function.
So then, Susie, what's the final step?
We have a feeling on that first day of work, they hear very little we say in terms of what it's like to work at Sun, other than just how to cope one day at a time. So we plan a program about every month or 6 weeks in which we bring together all the new hired employees who've come on board for the past 6 weeks or so, and we spend a day with them.
Well, tell me, why do you feel that's necessary?
We work in an environment where it's a little hard to see the end product sitting here in the Dallas office. We're in the business of exploring for and producing oil. And it's not like an assembly line environment where you can see the end product easily. So we spend a lot of time up front with our line managers, vice presidents of the various organizations, taking time to explain the business that we're really in. What are the constraints that are working against us in the external environment? What are we all about? What is the business of producing oil? And helping that employee to understand the business that we're in, and something about the company and its value systems.
Okay, that is why you have the third phase. Then what's involved in this phase?
Then we go into more detail on those systems that are in place that really affect that individual's development of their career, how career planning takes place, how performance appraisal is done on an annual basis, what kind of feedback they can expect, their role and responsibility in these areas. We have an internal job posting system through which we fill most of our jobs at the upper levels. That process is explained to them. All the kinds of things that we feel will contribute to their effective assimilation into our workforce. And at that point in time, they are also shown individual people in the organization that they can go to. They're introduced to them. They know what the function of that person is and what kinds of information they can get from various individuals that we feel they will need to know in order to effectively assimilate into the workforce.
Once a new employee has gone through orientation, the next step is training. What do you see as the purpose of training at Sun?
When we bring an employee into our organization, we've made an investment in that person. We believe that they can become a very productive part of our organization and contribute to the bottom line. We know that the development of that person is a two-part responsibility. The person has to want to grow and develop, but Sun also has a commitment. Some time ago, our board of directors developed a creed by which we would manage this organization. And a part of that creed states that we believe the development of people to be one of the worthiest goals of civilization. And at Sun, we manage by that philosophy. And the development of people many times is tied closely to specific training opportunities. The knowledge that's available, the technology that's improving constantly, these kinds of things change regularly, and it requires regular update. The college degree that the new employee comes in with may become obsolete very quickly in a particular field, and it requires our constant training, both in technical fields and in management techniques and styles, and we feel those things are very important.
Well, now, you know, Susie, earlier we had our cameras over at Sun documenting some of your training sessions, and now I'd like us to take a look at what we found going on.
Let me go back and review the 6 value types. The theoretical, the economic, the aesthetic, the social, the political.
The purpose of training is to supply skills and knowledge to improve performance.
The motivation to accomplish both. So
One way that's done is in a classroom setting, away from the pressures of the workplace.
Some of you may have been saying to yourself, yeah, that's well and good. I know, but I've already tried. All that doesn't work. What you were saying is, I don't expect nothing to happen. And so it won't. So those are 6 values that we've identified.
Let's look at the evolution of computers and the various types of computer systems.
With a subject like computers, classroom lectures might be used to supply background,
The standard cursor.
while some hands-on experience is needed to really develop skills.
So I'm going to go into the system and get a screen up that has characters all over it.
You can get that with vestibule training. It takes place in a simulated work environment with sample equipment. At Sun, we also found an example of a third type on-the-job training. OJT takes place in the work environment.
Cindy, could you please come help me?
Sure. What seems to be the problem?
Well, I'm trying to reformat.
You are actually doing the job, while a coworker or supervisor acts as the trainer.
Let's look at your revenue column there.
Okay.
And let's reformat that. Okay.
I go up to the format.
Right there.
And the comma. Okay. And then just let out.
Right.
Okay.
And you've got it.
Great. Thanks.
So, Susie, with that as a background, how would you describe the training you do at Sun?
Our training programs are developed on a needs basis. We try to assess every year through surveys with managers and employees what the organization views its particular needs to be, and then design programs to meet those needs. As those programs are designed and developed, they may take the form of a classroom situation, which is lecture and participation. It may require on-the-job training, as in our field operations. It may be that we need to bring in an expert in the field that we do not have in-house, the available expertise to train people in some new field. It may mean that we need to bring in new equipment. Recently, we have begun training our secretarial help in word processing, because that's a technology that's come along since many of them had their secretarial training, and we have facilities set up to train them in that area. So it's a combination of on-the-job training, of lecture, of participation, of actual experience in doing certain things that are skill builders.
Now, I'd like to move on to another phase of the subject, and I'm going to ask another guest to join us. But I'll be returning to you shortly, Susie, for some more questions after we go for a moment to Washington, D.C. and Professor Robert Luke. He's with us from George Washington University. How are you today, Professor Luke?
Very well, Alex. Thank you for the invitation to talk with you.
For the past few minutes, we've been talking with Susie Christie at the Sun Company headquarters in Dallas, and she'll be joining in. Dr. Luke, we've seen that companies spend a lot of time, money, and energy acquiring and developing people. What kind of control devices do they have to see that it all pays off?
I think one place a company could look for that kind of control would be to a performance appraisal process, which by definition means there are objectives for all employees in the company, which are to be assessed periodically during a performance appraisal process. And one should be able to therefore see changes, hopefully improvements, in people's performance, and to the extent those improvements in performance are in the direction that was initially agreed upon and that might have been reinforced by some training programs or some development opportunities.
Then what are the specific goals of performance appraisal?
I would say the specific goals of performance appraisal, Alex, is being to assess the extent to which a employee's performance objectives have been met over the past 6 months, a year, whatever the case might be, as one. Second kind of objective being to set new objectives or objectives in the future for the employee. And thirdly, to provide, it's a way of providing periodic feedback to an employee on how they're doing, which is useful in an information sense. And it also says to employees, look, we care about you. Your manager, your supervisor is willing to invest this kind of time and energy to talk about you, your performance, and your career with our organization. Performance appraisals are, I think, the formal times for evaluation of performance to take place, and can very well be reinforced throughout the year by discussions and counseling on performance matters as they arise.
Okay, fine. Let me ask our other guest. Susie, can you add anything to that from your own experience? How does performance appraisal at Sun Exploration work? What are the specific goals?
First and foremost, it is to improve the performance of the individual, to improve the contribution that they're making. It's one of the most difficult jobs we have as human resource managers is to keep that in the forefront of the manager's mind. That performance appraisal is not a time for dropping a bombshell on an employee. It is just the culmination of coaching and guiding that employee through the year. And I try to make it my personal goal with my staff, and encourage managers too, that there is never a surprise when you do the annual performance appraisal. That we've been talking daily and working on various problems and issues and constraints that may be getting in the way of our completing our goals as planned. But if the employee is having some problem in performing as we would like for them to, that it's not a surprise that we drop on them at performance appraisal time, but that performance appraisal, the goal of it continues to be improved performance, not a time for reprimands. And so the goal continually should be improved performance, which indirectly is reflected in improved performance in the profit picture.
Dr. Luke, let me ask you, if a goal of the performance appraisal is to improve individual performance, how would you say it affects the staffing plans of a company?
The information generated by performance appraisals would provide patterns for people to look at as they think about staffing over the long term.
Don't some people have the notion that performance appraisals, not people, were just put away in a filing cabinet someplace? But that's not the case, I take it.
Well, I would agree with you, Alex. Hopefully they're not just locked away in file cabinets. It strikes me that the human resource management people would be in kind of a catbird seat possibility, where they would have access to performance appraisal results. Now, assuming the confidentiality issues can be maintained, that would be a wealth of information to look at where are the problems, where are the glitches, where are we understaffed, where are we overstaffed, what kind of new skills do we need that we don't necessarily have given a change in our product line or competition, or we're automating our offices. So in the area of skill inventory, manpower planning, even succession planning.
Susie, I'm sure appraisals don't get put away in some dark file at Sun. Seriously, though, you heard what Dr. Luke said. How is information you get from performance appraisals used at Sun Exploration?
Okay, primarily it would be looking at group trends where you have a job group and you can look and see how employees have fared with the kinds of backgrounds that they had. For instance, you might take a group of accountants and or accounting assistants, and you could pinpoint through performance appraisals those who had performed well and what their backgrounds and education and experience were. And then when you're looking to staff those jobs again, be sure that you're zeroing in on those strengths that those particular people brought to the workplace. It also might point out to you some deficiencies, some areas that they perhaps needed more training in that they did not have that got in the way of their performance.
And with that, much to my regret, our time has gotten away from us. Thank you very much, Susie Christie of Sun Oil Company in Dallas.
Thank you, Alex. It's been my pleasure.
And you, Dr. Robert Luke in Washington, D.C., thank you for sharing your time and your insight with us.
Well, you're welcome, Alex, and thank you very much for inviting me. It has been a pleasure talking with you. It's a topic near and dear to my heart. Thank you.
Maybe the most important thing we've learned in this last half hour is that the survival and the prosperity of a company depends on the quality of its people. Acquiring them, developing their potential all through their working years is built into every manager's job. Successful companies approach that job with a plan and structure to carry it out. I hope maybe that what we have learned has helped unravel the mysteries behind this, the job application form. I'm Alex Burton, and this has been The Business File.
The preceding program is part of a college credit course.